the nightmare.
Welcome to another spine-tingling episode of Teddy's Nightmares, where the shadows whisper and the unseen becomes seen. I'm your host on this eerie journey, delving into stories that blur the line between reality and the otherworldly. Tonight, we venture into the realms of the unexplained, from the echoing corridors of a cemetery at night to the mysterious apparition of a lady in white. Each tale is a brush with the inexplicable, a dance with the paranormal that will leave you questioning what lurks in the corners of our world. So, brace yourself, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It's time to step into a world where the ordinary gives way to the hauntingly extraordinary. Let's begin. Story 1. I have a tale to tell, a tale so bizarre and unsettling that it still lingers in my memory, as vivid as the day it happened. This isn't just any story, it's an account of something that occurred to me, something I can only describe as paranormal. Let me take you back to 2017, the year I was on the cusp of adulthood, about to transition from high school to college. To give you a bit of background, I hail from a middle-class family in India. I have a younger brother and sister, and we've always lived under one roof with our parents. As I was nearing the end of my high school years, I decided to venture into a small business dealing in ladies' outfits. It's a common trait here, and I saw it as a viable path, especially with the encouragement and support of my family. A friend, already established in this business, offered to mentor me. His home wasn't too far from mine, but the journey was somewhat circuitous unless I took the shortcut through the local cemetery. I traversed this shortcut frequently, without incident, until one fateful Sunday evening. My friend urgently summoned me. It was around 8 p.m. Deciding to take the shortcut, I noticed a new grave beside the path. Not thinking much of it, I hurried on. That night, after a disagreement with my friend, I left his house around 1 a.m., feeling irate and agitated. In my perturbed state, I chose the cemetery shortcut again. As I entered, a strange discomfort washed over me. It was then I noticed something truly bizarre. Water was seeping out from the new grave, flooding the path. The night was clear. There was no logical source for this water. As I cautiously proceeded, a sudden gust of wind whipped up, yet the air was still. Confusion set in. This was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Then, a nearby coconut tree began shaking violently, while the others remained motionless, as if some unseen force was assaulting it. Ignoring my rising fear, I started running, splashing through the water. Behind me, a howling wind surged, carrying with it a cacophony of whispers, loud yet unintelligible. It felt as though the whispers were both in my ears and echoing around me. I ran towards the cemetery's central lamp post, where I saw a few men standing. Startled by my sudden appearance, they recognized me as a local. I frantically relayed my experience, and they advised me never to traverse the cemetery at night again. I hurried home, where my family slept, oblivious to the night's events. The next day, I sought out the men, the caretakers of the cemetery, only to learn they had quit that very morning. It's been almost 6 years since that night, and the mystery still haunts me. I've never seen those men again, and despite revisiting the cemetery at various times, I've found no explanation for what I experienced. Some might dismiss my story as a figment of my imagination, but I assure you, it's as real as anything I've ever experienced. Since that night, other strange occurrences have reshaped my life. I'm no longer afraid, but that night's events remain as clear and as unsettling as if they happened just yesterday. Story 2. When I was 8 years old, a series of events led my mom, my younger brother, and me to relocate to a new home. It was during the height of summer, and our new abode, while charming in its quaintness, came with a notable inconvenience. There was only a single air conditioner installed in the entire house. The summer heat was oppressive, especially at night, and it forced us to adapt by sleeping together in the same room, the only one graced with the cool air the AC provided. Despite the crowded sleeping arrangement, I found a sort of solace in the late hours of the night. The living room, with its worn but comfy couch and an old television set, became my secret nightly retreat. There was something about the quiet stillness of the house, interrupted only by the low hum of the TV, that felt comforting. Night after night, I would sneak out of our shared room to watch my favorite shows, basking in the solitude and the escape from the stifling heat of our shared bedroom. This routine continued for weeks, becoming my little act of rebellion and independence. But one night, something happened that altered my perception of our new home and, indeed, the world around me. It was a night like any other, around 2 a.m., when I woke up, my body sticky with sweat. Eager for my nightly ritual, I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb my mom or brother. As I approached the door to make my way to the living room, I felt an inexplicable sense of apprehension. It was as though the air had grown denser, charged with an unseen presence. Shaking off this feeling as mere sleep-induced jitters, I reached for the door handle and gently pushed it open. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a sliver of the dimly lit hallway that led to the living room. And that's when I saw her. There, standing just inches away from the threshold of the door, was a figure so bizarre and unsettling that it rooted me to the spot. A woman, garbed in what appeared to be white, nun-like robes, stood motionless. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost luminescent in the darkness of the hallway. But it was her eyes that struck a chord of primal fear in me. They were completely black, devoid of pupils, like dark voids that seemed to swallow the very light around them. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. I was caught in the gaze of those black eyes, frozen by a mix of horror and disbelief. My heart pounded against my chest, loud in the silence of the night. In a reflex of fear, I pushed the door shut, my small hands gripping the handle with a strength I didn't know I possessed. I pressed my back against the door, as if my tiny frame could barricade against the mysterious figure outside. I remained there, my entire body tense, not daring to move or make a sound. The clock in the room ticked away the minutes, each second stretching into eternity. It wasn't until the first hints of dawn began to seep through the curtains and the familiar sounds of my mom waking up filled the house that I finally released my hold on the door handle. The aftermath of that night was a blur of fear and confusion. I refused to sleep alone or venture into the living room after dark. I recounted the experience to my mom numerous times, each time hoping she would believe me. But she always dismissed it as a child's nightmare, a product of an overactive imagination fueled by the stress of our recent move. But I knew, with a certainty that sunk deep into my bones, that what I had seen was real. It was an encounter that transcended the boundaries of imagination and reality. To this day, the memory of the woman in white, with her abyss-like eyes, haunts me. It's a reminder of a night when the familiar confines of my home were transformed into a stage for something inexplicable and terrifying, leaving me with questions that still linger unanswered. Story 3. The Phantom Intruders of My Childhood Home. It's been years since I've spoken about this, but it's a true story that still haunts my dreams and leaves me questioning the line between reality and the paranormal. This happened when I was about 15, living in a quiet, almost too serene neighborhood where the most exciting event was the annual block party. But one night, everything changed, and it left a lasting mark on my perception of safety and the unexplained. It was a typical autumn evening, the kind where the chill in the air starts settling in and leaves rustle ominously in the breeze. My parents were away for the weekend, and I was alone, enjoying the freedom that every teenager craves. I remember I was up late, probably around midnight, watching a horror movie, which, in hindsight, might not have been the best idea. As the movie played, I heard a faint tapping sound. Initially, I chalked it up to the movie's sound effects. But as I paused the movie, the tapping continued, rhythmic and persistent, coming from the back door. My heart started to race, but I tried to convince myself it was just a branch or something equally mundane. Mustered up the courage to check, I crept towards the back door, the floorboards creaking under my feet. Peeking through the curtain, I saw nothing but the darkness of our backyard. The tapping stopped. Relieved yet still on edge, I decided to double-check the locks on the doors and windows. Everything was secure. I went back to my movie, but the feeling of unease lingered. Then, the real terror began. I heard what sounded like whispers, multiple voices, hushed but distinct, coming from upstairs. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone in the house? I grabbed a baseball bat, my hand shaking, and slowly ascended the stairs. The whispers grew louder as I reached the top. I could almost make out words, but not quite. It was as if the voices were right on the edge of coherence. My parents' bedroom door was ajar, and the whispers seemed to emanate from there. I pushed the door open, ready to confront whatever or whoever was there. The room was empty. No sign of anyone. But then, the closet door slowly creaked open. I froze, every horror movie cliché running through my mind. Bracing myself, I swung the bat as I approached the closet. Empty. The whispers had stopped. The room was silent except for my heavy breathing. I searched the entire house, top to bottom, but found no one. No signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. I couldn't make sense of it. Unable to sleep and too scared to stay alone, I called a friend to pick me up. I waited outside, not daring to step back into the house. The rest of the night, I was plagued with the feeling of being watched, the whispers echoing in my mind. The next day, we discovered our neighbors had experienced a break-in that very night. It was a group of thieves who had been targeting homes in our area. The police theorized that they might have come to our house too, but got scared off for some reason. But that explanation never sat right with me. The whispers, the closet door, it felt too personal, too eerie to be just thieves scouting the house. To this day, I can't shake off the feeling that what happened that night was more than just a close call with burglars. It felt like something else was in the house with me, something unexplainable and far more terrifying than mere thieves. Story 4. I recently had a long conversation with my uncle, a seasoned and now retired sailor, and he shared a story that still sends shivers down my spine. It's a tale so strange and eerie that I feel compelled to share it here. My uncle spent many years working on the SS Arthur M. Anderson, a freighter that traversed the Great Lakes. They mainly hauled iron ore and limestone, navigating the vast, often treacherous waters. He's seen his fair share of odd occurrences and rough weather, but nothing compares to what happened one November evening in 2007. They were en route to Cleveland, Ohio, crossing the vast expanse of Lake Superior. The sky was clear, the stars were out, and the lake was unusually calm. It was around 7 p.m. when the crew's routine was shattered by a chilling distress call crackling through their radio. The call was from a vessel claiming to be the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Now, any sailor worth their salt on the Great Lakes knows the legend of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It was a massive freighter that tragically sank during a storm in 1975, claiming the lives of all 29 crew members. The Fitzgerald sinking was a maritime disaster that left a deep scar in the history of Great Lakes shipping. Initially, the crew of the Anderson thought it was a sick joke. But as they listened, a sense of unease grew. The voice on the radio was panicked, describing a violent storm, fierce winds, and massive waves that were overwhelming the ship. The voice was full of genuine terror, but here's the thing, the night was calm. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the lake was as still as glass. My uncle and his crew rushed to check their radar, but it only deepened the mystery. There were no other ships in sight for at least 70 nautical miles, and their radio's range was only about 60 nautical miles. Whoever was making the call, it seemed, wasn't anywhere near them. For about an hour, the distress calls continued, each one more desperate than the last. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The radio fell silent, leaving a haunting stillness in the air. The crew was left in a state of shock and confusion. Nobody on the Anderson slept that night. They were haunted by the thought that they might have heard the last moments of a ghost ship, a vessel lost to time but not to the waters of Lake Superior. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on them. The Anderson was not only the sister ship to the Edmund Fitzgerald, but also the last vessel to have contact with it before it sank in 1975. The following morning, the atmosphere on the Anderson was heavy. They radioed in the incident, but without any other ships in the area or any record of distress calls being made, there was little to be done. It was as if the night's events were a ghostly echo from the past, reaching out through the decades. Could it have been a prank, a fluke, or perhaps something more? Could the desperate calls have been the lingering echoes of the lost crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald, forever bound to the lake that claimed them? We may never know. But what my uncle experienced that night remains one of the most unsettling and unexplainable stories I've ever heard, a maritime mystery that blurs the line between the living and the spectral, the past and the present. Story 5. The night I was trapped in a snowstorm. I never thought a simple winter trip could turn into the most terrifying night of my life. This is my story, a true one, about the night I was trapped in a snowstorm, fighting for survival against the merciless force of nature. It was 2 winters ago. I decided to take a solo road trip through the mountains. As an avid nature lover and photographer, I was eager to capture the beauty of the winter landscape. The weather forecast was clear, or so I thought. I packed my camera, some food, and warm clothes, and set off in my old but reliable SUV. The drive started off beautifully. Snow-capped trees lined the winding mountain roads, and the world around me was a serene blanket of white. It was peaceful, almost surreal. But as the afternoon turned to evening, the weather took a sudden and vicious turn. Heavy snow began to fall, quickly transforming the landscape into a blinding white haze. The road became slippery and treacherous. My heart raced as I tried to navigate through the increasingly severe storm. I told myself to stay calm, that I could find a place to wait it out. But then, my worst fear materialized. My SUV, struggling against the deepening snow, came to a shuddering halt. I was stuck, alone, in the middle of nowhere, with the storm raging around me. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of my situation. The snow was falling so thick and fast that I could barely see a few feet ahead. I couldn't risk leaving the car, the cold was intense, and the risk of getting lost in the storm was too high. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. It was just me, my car, and the howling wind outside. I wrapped myself in all the clothes I had, trying to preserve my body heat and hoped the storm would pass quickly. Hours ticked by, each minute stretching longer than the last. As night fell, the temperature dropped further. I felt the cold seeping into my bones. I tried to keep myself awake, afraid that if I fell asleep, I might not wake up. Thoughts of my family and friends filled my mind, along with a deep regret for not preparing better for this journey. I remember thinking about all the survival stories I'd read, wondering if this was how it felt to be on the brink. Every gust of wind that shook the car made me jump, and the sound of the snow hitting the car was a constant, unnerving reminder of my predicament. It was the longest night of my life. Miraculously, as the first light of dawn broke, the storm began to subside. The world outside was still, covered in a thick blanket of snow. I mustered the strength to dig my car out and slowly, carefully, made my way back to civilization. Reaching home was an indescribable relief. This experience taught me a harsh lesson about respecting nature and the importance of proper preparation. It's a night that I will never forget, a night when the serene beauty of winter turned into a terrifying battle for survival. Story 6. The Phantom Truck of Cascade Mountains, an unfathomable encounter. Hey everyone, I debated sharing this for quite some time, but here goes. This is a story that not only challenges the boundaries of belief, but also questions the very fabric of reality as we know it. My friend, Mike, who experienced this with me, finds it just as hard to reconcile with what we know to be true. I'm a nature photographer in my late 50s, living in the Pacific Northwest, a region known for its stunning natural landscapes and mysterious folklore. I've spent my life capturing the beauty of the outdoors, particularly around the Cascade Mountains. This story unfolded in the fall of 2019, a time of year when the forests here are a photographer's dream. On a crisp October evening, my friend Mike came over. We had planned a nighttime photography excursion to capture the forest under the moonlight. The goal was to get some long-exposure shots of the autumn leaves and the night sky. We packed our gear and set off, excited about the prospect of a productive night. The drive to the trailhead was serene, the road winding through dense forests that seemed to swallow the light of our headlights. We talked about camera settings and the spots we hoped to shoot, the usual photographer banter. As we approached the trailhead parking lot, we noticed something unusual. An old, rusted pickup truck was parked in the corner. It was a beat-up Ford model, something from the 70s or 80s, and it looked like it hadn't moved in years. We didn't think much of it at the time and started our hike. About half a mile in, we found the perfect spot. The moon was bright, casting eerie shadows through the trees, creating a perfect backdrop for our photos. We were setting up our tripods when we heard a distant, rumbling sound. It sounded like an old engine, struggling and sputtering. The noise grew louder, echoing through the silent forest. We exchanged worried glances but decided to focus on our photography, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. We managed to take a few shots, but our concentration was broken when the rumbling noise abruptly stopped. We decided to head back to the parking lot, unease turning to concern. Our steps quickened as we navigated the dark path, the only sounds being our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. Reaching the parking lot, we were startled to see the old truck now positioned as if it were about to leave. Its engine was running, but there was no sign of the driver. We cautiously approached, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. That's when the truck's headlights flickered on, blinding us momentarily. I called out, asking if anyone needed help, but there was no response. The truck idled, its engine humming in the quiet of the night. Then, in an instant, the engine and lights died. We blinked, our eyes adjusting to the sudden darkness, and when we could see again, the truck was gone. It made no sense. There were no sounds of it driving away, no tire marks, nothing to suggest it had ever been there. We scoured the area, thinking perhaps it had rolled away or was hidden by the shadows, but there was nothing. Feeling a mix of fear and confusion, we decided to pack up and leave. The drive back was filled with theories and speculations, none of which seemed plausible. How could a solid, tangible object like that truck just vanish? In the days that followed, Mike and I revisited the site several times, each visit deepening the mystery. We talked to locals, inquiring about the truck and any similar occurrences. Some shared tales of ghostly sightings in the mountains, but nothing quite like what we experienced. The incident became a frequent topic of discussion between us. We analyzed every detail, every possible explanation, from optical illusions to elaborate pranks. Yet, nothing fit. It was as if we had brushed against a hidden reality, a glitch in the normalcy of our world. Now, when we recount that night, we find ourselves in a loop of disbelief and bewilderment. I've always been a skeptic, grounded in the tangible, the explainable. But this experience has left me questioning the limits of our understanding. It's a peculiar feeling, knowing you've witnessed something so profoundly unexplainable. You see it, you live it, yet part of you refuses to accept it as reality. It challenges everything you know, leaving you in a limbo of doubt and wonder. This encounter with the phantom truck of the Cascade Mountains remains one of the most puzzling and unnerving experiences of my life. It's a reminder that there are mysteries out there, lurking in the shadows of our understanding, waiting to be uncovered. Story 7. A ghostly encounter at the university library. I work at the university library, and due to ongoing renovations, I've been temporarily relocated to provide reference assistance in an old and used classroom. This particular classroom, 204, is in a building that dates back to the early 1900s, imbued with the charm and quirks of old architecture. I've been using this room all semester without any incident, finding solace in its solitude and the rhythmic clanking of the ancient heating system. The building has these classic, old-style radiators that emit all sorts of noises as the pipes expand and contract. It's especially noticeable at the end of the semester when the facility's crew turns off the boilers. The cooling pipes groan and bang, creating an eerie, almost ghostly ambience. I often joke to myself about it, likening the sounds to something out of a horror movie. As the semester drew to a close, I was finishing up one of my last shifts for the term. The day had been uneventful, but as dusk began to settle in, the atmosphere in classroom 204 started to change. The usual cacophony of pipe noises had ceased, leaving a heavy silence that seemed to press against the walls. I was seated at an old wooden desk, working on my laptop when I felt my chair begin to move. It was a slow, deliberate roll backward, and I initially thought I was subconsciously pushing myself away from the desk. But as I paid more attention, I realized I wasn't moving the chair at all. In fact, it felt like someone, or something, was pulling it back. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt a distinct, cold presence at the back of my neck, as if someone were standing right behind me. Panic set in as the chair continued to move, now with more force. I spun around, half expecting to see someone, but the room was empty. No one was there, yet the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. Reacting instinctively, I stood up, swiping the air behind me as I shouted, "This is not okay." My voice echoed in the empty room, my heart pounding in my ears. I grabbed my belongings in a haste, my laptop and bag clutched tightly against my chest as I made a beeline for the door. As I hurried through the dimly lit hallways, the sense of unease grew. I felt like I was being followed, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I reached my car, glancing back at the building, half expecting to see a face in one of the darkened windows. Driving away, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. The encounter in classroom 204 was unlike anything I'd experienced before. It was as though an unseen entity had made its presence known, leaving me with an unshakable feeling of being watched, even invaded. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the incident. I even did a bit of research on the building and learned about its long, storied history. There were rumors of it being haunted, tales of past students and faculty members experiencing unexplainable events. I had always been a skeptic, but what happened in that classroom made me question everything. I decided to return to classroom 204 during the day, driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure. The room was bathed in sunlight, its shadows and secrets hidden by the light of day. But even then, there was a feeling of being watched, a whisper of something otherworldly lingering in the air. From that day on, I approached my work in that old classroom with a newfound respect and caution. I never again experienced anything as direct as the chair incident, but there were moments, fleeting shadows, sudden drops in temperature, and the occasional feeling of a presence that kept me on edge. I never felt threatened, just aware that in classroom 204, I might not be entirely alone. The experience has stayed with me, a ghostly reminder that sometimes, in the quiet corners of old buildings, the past lingers in ways we can't fully understand or explain. Wow, as we wrap up this episode of Teddy's Nightmares, we're left with a lingering chill and a multitude of questions. These stories, plucked from the depths of the internet, bring us face to face with the inexplicable and the bizarre. So, I ask you, dear listeners, have you ever encountered something that defies explanation? Have you felt the icy grip of fear from an unseen presence or witnessed an event that left you questioning reality? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences add to the rich tapestry of mystery that we explore in each episode. And remember, if you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Your support helps us continue to bring these chilling tales to light. Join us next time on Teddy's Nightmares, where we'll delve into more stories that teeter on the edge of the supernatural and the unexplained. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and most importantly, stay safe. Goodbye until the next video, and remember, in the world of the unknown, anything is possible.